Okay, so we're about midway through the session on Wednesday, the 20th of November. We've got the VIX expiry out of the way. Markets dropped and then held a retrace against yesterday's rise and now are starting to push back up. But they've got various layers of resistance to get back above in order to confirm that we've got a 1-2 off yesterday's low and that yesterday's low is any good. Key level to watch in the SPX is the 57.70. We don't really want to see it get acceptance below that level today. Meanwhile, we've got NVIDIA reporting their earnings after the close. I have just posted a very detailed write-up on NVIDIA in the stocks and ETFs thread. The sentiment on earnings is very, very bullish, 74% bullish. The estimates are bullish and midway in line, if you will, with the forward guidance that was given by NVIDIA during the press conference at their last earnings. Now, you will hear various rumours about the Blackwell chips in the racks overheating and the cooling not working. On the other hand, there have been from Dell successful shipments and installations. So I think that's something of a misnomer. The other thing to pay attention to is Supermicro. You've seen the chart of Supermicro and its demise and the accounting shenanigans that appear to be going on there. They represent 10% of NVIDIA's revenue. It's not really that relevant in that if you look at what Elon Musk has just done with his AI venture, he has placed a $6.5 billion order on NVIDIA and he has switched. You don't buy them as just GPUs from NVIDIA, you buy them as a complete ecosystem in a rack on the servers with the cooling, everything else. And he's switched the supply chain from Supermicro servers and racks to Dell. And there are any number of alternatives to Supermicro for the end users. Now, those end users are very heavily locked in. It's not just about the Blackwell chips and all the rest of it. You've got the CUDA software ecosystems around those chipsets. Those, we're pretty familiar with those with StreamView in that we've used them in the past. It's a way of moving information and data to the GPU and back again. That's established very, very strongly over a long period of time as a market leader. But when you invest in working with and integrating those types of software ecosystems, it's not a simple decision to change supplier and change your direction. It really isn't. So they're fairly well embedded as the market leader in their space. Having said that, let's just flip this chart out to a weekly chart of NVIDIA. And you can see that if we've got, it's difficult even with a log scale chart with this, but if that's a 1-2 at cycle degree off the inception low back in the late 90s, then we've got a 1-2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think the high that we saw all the way back here, which was in December last year, was likely the wave 3 at the 1618 fib here of a larger degree wave 3. We then had the pullback into the 1382 fib and wave 4 of 1 lesser degree, and where we got previous support from a range of block trades at that level. Up we came, and in early 2023 there was the breakout level leading to this. So I think this is, I mean, if I'm wrong and this is very, very extended for this wave 3, then, which is possible, we're still going to get a 4 at primary degree back at some point soon. But I would contend that we're actually in the primary fifth of a cycle degree wave 3 here in NVIDIA, after which we should see a cycle degree wave 4. Now, that should take us back. I think it'll probably come back and test the breakout level from earlier this year. That seems unthinkable, doesn't it? We're at 144 and we're going to come back to around the $31 level and possibly lower. But that's not going to be tonight. That's going to take time. And I think we've still got higher to go in this stock. It's a question of, if this is a 1, 2, 3 and this was a 4, then we are in another potential 5-wave sequence to the upside. Is that 5-wave sequence that we're seeing a wave 1 of a 5th that's going to subdivide and we're going to go a lot higher? Or is it just going to give us one 5-wave structure up and then we get into the 4? I would contend that it's more likely that we see the latter. Now, if we look at our signals here, so we have had a CRSI buy signal and we did get from this peak momentum divergence into that peak. That's perfectly normal to see that. And then we've had this period here, but momentum's picking up again. The Mansfield is still positive. We've had a wave cycle trader trender buy signal in the last few days with this move up that we've been seeing. So we've got mixed signals. The consensus is a +2, which, although it's positive, is not that strong on a daily time frame. But if we bring it all the way down to a 2-hour chart, and this is where it gets a little awkward. So there's the peak, which I think was the 3. And we can count this as a 4 here, A, B, C, 1, 2, and then it is, again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and A. If we were to come down, I think we would retrace against this as a B wave of a 3 in an ending diagonal. That's one possibility here. It would require a break below 132.82. Now, if you look at the options market, let me just bring that over here and let's go to, NVIDIA. And you can see the open interest here. So the first key level below the market is at 140. So that's the first key level. Then we've got 135, then we've got 132. So those are the supports from the open interest in the options market. The magnet initially, I think, is going to be this 150. We've got a huge amount of open interest here and then at 155. If we break above 150 tonight, I think we'll accelerate up to 155 rapidly. And if we break through there, we'll see 160 rapidly. And then it depends from there. The options market is pricing in just under a 10% move. So that's going to be around $14 from where we are now. That puts the stock up nearer 160. And you can see that, again, there's a lot of open interest up at 160 here in the market. Now, what's interesting with NVIDIA is if you go back and look at the last earnings over the last 2 years, we've had fairly substantial moves. The average is 9.8%. They haven't all been positive. There was an outlier of 26% or something, or 16%, sorry, and one of them was negative. But what you tend to see following the move is 20 to 30% moves in the stock in the following 3 months. Now, whether we get to see quite that at this stage of the pattern remains to be seen, but it's not all about the one-day move here in NVIDIA. If this count is any good, whereby I'm counting this as an A, B, C, D, E, a running flat for the 4, we've got a 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2 developing. This needs to break that 150. We came up and just about touched it yesterday, which is where the all-time high is. You can see the block trades, and you can see this resistance level I've got on the 2-hour chart here. We need to push through that. The 1.0 extension of the move is at 156, and the 123.6 fib is at 163. So I'm looking in a bullish scenario for this to break 150 and then also clear above 156. And it will then need to hold 156 ideally if we're going to subdivide up to a minimum target of 190 in NVIDIA overall, and possibly as high as 204. That's the bullish case. Now, the bearish case would be this. either, it's coming back here, we see a pullback, and that pullback, it could come, you can count a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for a wave 1. So the absolute pivot for any higher is all the way down at 92.56. I would suggest if we break 132, then this stock's in trouble. And it may well be that we've seen either the higher degree 3 or potentially this is all part of an ongoing wave 4 where we've made a fractionally higher high and therefore an expanded flat, but we're going to come much deeper down into this support zone. This is the longer term daily support zone that, if whilst it's holding above here, still suggests that we've got a fifth wave up to come. The counts that I've just given you are on the assumption that the wave 4 in some way, shape or form in this mess here is done, and that we are going to break out lightly above 165 with a target up at 190 minimum in order to complete the larger degree move to the upside. Now, if I then just bring the cycles into play, so on the daily time frame, this is suggesting that NVIDIA may well move down for another 2 weeks before we get another push up. So that would suggest we may see a pullback, but let's have a look at that. The cycle that it's picked is the 81-day cycle. We've got the 200-day and the 300-day that are equally of equal strength. If I put the 300-day cycle in, that would suggest that it's got longer period to go to the downside. And if I look at the 200-day cycle here, that suggests we've got more upside into the 20th of January. So we've got very mixed messaging from cycles here. What that would suggest is whichever way we get the move, it's going to be choppy. And that would fit with both an ongoing deeper wave 4 or a diagonal finish for the 5th. So cycles on a daily time frame, not much help here, I would suggest, in NVIDIA at this particular juncture. I would watch, more importantly from a cycles perspective, the CRSI. If this continues down and breaks the lower band and we get a Mansfield sell, then we are at the very least in an ongoing wave 4 with a target down at least 92 and possibly lower. So a break of 132 opens the door to that possibility. If the CRSI turns back up and breaks above the upper line, then that would suggest we're going to get the top, we're going to move up to that 190 area sooner rather than later, and finish the pattern. Let's just take it out to the weekly chart for a moment, and this is the weekly composite cycle. Now, if I just bring up the Cycles Explorer here, so you can see the cycle that it's picked is the 176-day cycle, and it's harmonic of a 371-day cycle. And if you look at this, it is picking out the peaks and troughs reasonably well, and it's suggesting that we are very close to, if not at, a top. You can see the CRSI, it gave a sell signal which gave that little move down, and it's very diverged from the highs we've seen, as is the momentum, as is the trender, and the core dominant cycle on a weekly basis is right at its turn point. Now, these are not pinpoint. You can't turn around and pinpoint a day from a weekly cycle. What you can say is that at some point in the not too distant future, we are likely to see NVIDIA start to trend down, which means we are likely to see a higher degree correction. And that is either going to be a cycle degree wave 4, or at the very least, it's going to be a primary degree wave 4 that takes us back to the 30. I mean, if it held and went sideways to down $49, but I would suggest nearer the $30 region as a minimum. So the heights we're at, I think, are going to be short-lived. I would prefer to see that one last push up towards the 190 region to finish the pattern. Now, let's then finally look at the relative rotation graphs. So the first thing I'm doing is looking at the semiconductors relating to the SPY on a daily basis. you can see, and I went through this in the weekend update, that the XLK and semiconductors in general have been very, very weak, which, you know, even the rally that we had following the US election results, they were not the drivers of that rally. And if you look at some of the more disruptive technologies and go and look at ARKK and some of the stocks within it, if you go and look at the focus list and the short-term focus list of stocks that I have on the site, and the smaller disruptive software type companies in there, they're the ones that have absolutely taken off. Whereas some of the big old sluggy heavyweights, although they've not fallen particularly, so they've not had a downward influence on the market per se, they have not been the ones driving this rally. NVIDIA, on the other hand, is still in the leading sector, but it is not heading in the right direction. It's heading towards the lagging sector, towards the weakening. We'll need to see it turn round. Doesn't need to necessarily, do that, but it needs to stop moving away from the direction that it's been in. If I move that out to, sorry, I didn't mean to do that, to the weekly time frame here, excuse me, and NVIDIA on a weekly time frame. So you can see the correction we've had. It's been very lackluster and sideways. On a weekly time frame, although it's not in the leading quadrant, this is where you want to buy stocks when they're improving and they're heading back towards the leading sector. And that's precisely what we're seeing here on a weekly time frame with NVIDIA. We're also seeing it with NU. You've seen it with Texas Instruments here. AMD is not looking so bad on the weekly time frame. So again, slightly mixed signals, although generally positive from the relative strength and relative rotation graphs. Weekly certainly quite positive, and the only thing against it on the daily, if we go back to that, is the direction that we're heading in, but we are still in the leading quadrant in NVIDIA on the relative rotation graphs. So that's what we've got going into the earnings this evening in NVIDIA. If you go and look at the thread, I've shown you the influence, if you will, based on current market capitalization. There's a graph there and on the SPX itself, and it is significant. Therefore, if we are going to push up and hold yesterday's lows in the SPX rather than getting a deeper correction, then we kind of need to see the positive earnings tonight from NVIDIA and positive forward guidance. Moreover, we need to see the market react positively to that. Now, one last thought on this. Next year's sales are effectively guaranteed because you've got backlogs of orders. The problem NVIDIA have been having is timely fulfillment. But if you look at their suppliers, they are now all talking about and actively have invested in increasing the ability to deliver the components and chips or the silicon, if you will, that NVIDIA rely on. So therefore, there is very, very strong evidence, and I've given you a write-up on things like the Blackwell chips, plus the markets, plus the share of market, plus also the CUDA operating systems and software ecosystems. There's plenty in there to suggest that the guidance may also be very, very strong again here from NVIDIA. But let's see where we are. They report 20 minutes after the close. So let's see where we are tomorrow morning in both NVIDIA, but also as importantly in the NDX and the SPX. And finally, if we take a look at the, where am I? Semiconductors. So let's take a quick look at the SMH here. And again, we've got this very, very messy pattern. But if you go back and think about the relative strength of this sector and some of the underperformers in it, like AMD and what have you, the big ones, and Intel even, plus NVIDIA not really participating, it's been consolidating, then this should be no surprise. But it looks to me like it needs another push up to a minimum of 294 in the SMH here. The pattern doesn't look complete, and this sort of pattern here has got wave 4 written all over it. To my mind, the semis are either going to get another dip and this 4 here is not in, but we still need another high, or somewhere in here, this is a very, very messy diagonal to the upside in the semis. Consensus is at a -10 on the daily chart. What we need to see is a flip. So you need to see typically you'll see the strat and the trender and the hull give you the early signals, but we will need to see a CRSI follow through after that if we're going to get immediate move to the upside in SMH. And again, I would suggest with NVIDIA's weighting, whether we get a deeper 4 in an ongoing 4, a deeper move down in an ongoing wave 4 in SMH, or breakout and complete the pattern, is going to depend completely upon NVIDIA's earnings and the market's reaction to it this evening.